Hello, everyone, and welcome to Osquery Office Hours. Those of you in the US, like me, we just did 4th of July. Those of you not in the US, happy July. So, welcome, everyone. Um, the first section of the meeting is announcements and highlights. I don't have anything. I don't know if anyone else does. Okay. Next section is sort of an open section, questions, issues, PRs, anything people want to discuss, anything new people have. But welcome, Lucas. Lucas? Um, I think I've seen you online, but I don't know if I've seen you in office hours. So, well, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Yeah, first time here. Hi all.
If there's anything you want to ask us, you could ask, or as ever you want. Next up, agenda items. We have one. I wrote it. It might be a quiet meeting today. We were saying we should release a 5.4 right around
Yes.
July 1st. It's about
Yes.
July 1st. There's some big PRs I'd love to see. I haven't managed to review them. Maybe we should just push them to 5.5.
Yeah, maybe, but I saw a lot of activity on that one that Charvel posted. Did it merge?
Which one?
I think it might have been endpoint security, file integrity monitoring,
Merged.
or
Yeah, a couple of Charvilles we got merged at the end of the week last week. One was endpoint security, the other was password policy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, 5.4 sounds like it has some new compelling features then. macOS Unified Logging has had a lot of review already. I don't know if you're satisfied, but I think Seth maybe was one of the people that was providing.
I haven't looked at it since who rewrote it. I haven't looked at it since it was rewritten most recently. I don't know if I need to or if we're happy enough.
Well, let's ask Stefano. That PR was to read from logs in a constrained way, and I know that we had a long discussion about how to put guardrails on that, and I think that the contributor played along and actually put those features in. Were they satisfactory?
Yeah, but I should echo Seth in the sense that I haven't looked at or tested the actual implementation. So yeah, I think we still miss a review in the end.
Okay, yeah, so Seth's gonna write that.
How much time do we think that review needs?
I don't know. It's a pretty big PR, so I'm a little worried it's not small.
Okay, well,
what do we think of doing a quicker review, merging it, and then just seeing how it works?
I feel like I should probably review it, but I wouldn't want to commit to a review in less than a week, unfortunately. I kind of think we should just cut 5.4. And we should
agree. I agree. If I could make a comment about the next PR on your list, Windows Update History, I've tested that on several OSs. I reviewed that code. I was good with it, but I don't have approval authority. Just putting in my vote, though.
I mean, that sounds good to me. And I mean, side note, can we give you approval authority?
technically. We
careful.
just didn't in the past, and we haven't revisited that question. To the extent we have process for that, I would say open a foundation ticket, and we can thumbs up it.
But I mean, like for right now, I'm happy to, Mike, if you leave a comment, if you leave an approving review on there, like it won't count for GitHub, but I'm happy to come take a quick look through it and say, I trust Mike, and I also had a quick look, and we'll get it approved and merged before we cut. That would be fine with me.
Thinking about this PR, I think I glanced at it early and it looked okay. The one thing that I'm never sure of on Windows is when we have to handle freeing memory. So that's part of why I'm never comfortable doing formal review on the Windows PRs, because I don't understand when we have to manage the memory ourselves. And I don't know if Mike, do you know, is that something you can look for, or is that?
If they, if I think it's relatively few APIs that allocate memory, and they're usually mentioned in the, I mean, it's always mentioned in the MSDN documentation. So I'll look at the specific APIs in use here. I don't recall specifically which ones they are, but I will take a look to see that they're not of the kind that allocates memory.
I just don't even know how to check. I'm so sorry. If you review it and think it's fine, then I think I was good with the basic structure of it. I reviewed it a while ago.
Okay, since it's out there and works, and I've looked at it, I'd be happy to see it land at 5.4. That's all I was saying. Okay. But I don't know about that third thing on the list.
A while ago, ICO 1 rewrote the SSH authorized parsing. I read it a while ago and left a bunch of comments and haven't had a chance to loop back. It's mostly just string parsing. I think we could probably just kick it forward.
Are there bugs in the current one that should motivate getting this in quicker?
I think it adds, I'm not sure. I think it adds support for like some obscure other set of SSH authorized keys syntax. But I don't totally understand what the motivation behind it was. One thing though is we talked about trying to cut releases more often, perhaps even monthly. So
yeah,
kicking something forward, if we think it will take us a week to review, kicking something forward shouldn't be very scary.
Right.
Yeah, my biggest concern is just, do we kick it forward and then go like, whoa, the next release isn't for a while, and then never get to reviewing it?
Yeah, we don't want to be 2 days from the next release timeline and say, oh, this thing, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I don't have a good answer other than to say we should keep trying. I mean, I guess we could try and talk about things at meetings more often. We could try and recreate the revisit PRs section of the meeting that we used to do back when we had a huge PR backlog.
What was it when it was huge? Do you remember?
A couple hundred.
Oh. I think we're at 35 or something now, so that's much better.
It still feels huge.
Yeah, when it doesn't fit on one page, it feels huge.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think what we just said is that we should take another look at the Windows Update history. We think we can get that done today. And then the other two we should push to 5.5. And we should try and continue aiming at a monthly cadence, because just broadly speaking, there's enough stuff that happens that we should do it.
Yeah. I have some milestone engineering to do there. The 5.4 is currently the catch-all, and I meant to move things into the 5.5. So right after this meeting ends, I should go do that.
And do it. We can also create like a future milestone. I don't know. Whatever you think makes sense.
Well, it's good to
certainly create milestones for like the next several or something too.
Yeah, it feels good to have that record of archived milestones. If you make current and next and just replace the content constantly,
it's hard.
You lose that history where you can go, oh, what did milestone look like last time? Not that we need it because we have tags and releases, but anyway.
I don't know. I see it as an experiment. If you're getting value, then I think we can keep doing it. I don't think our use of milestones is a little weird. Is my impression, right? If we were like doing a big feature like an Apple M1 release, like that would kind of be a milestone, and you'd hang issues under it. But it's not quite how we seem to work. Maybe it'll work that way in your private fork.
It kind of does sometimes, but
I know Stefano and Alessandro have a variety of other PRs hanging out in different places. Are any of those things you want to try and get done today, or can they all keep sitting?
no.
I mean, like it's not that I have a specific preference. And I also don't know which one it's easier for someone else to test. I mean, one for sure, I know it never had any reviews, so the CPU usage and CPU peak usage columns one.
Oh yeah, I
the
got
other
like halfway through that one.
Oh yeah, but it was in draft because there was a previous PR
Yeah.
needed. But yeah, and
That
maybe
one I find especially interesting because now that we've opened the can of worms of running little service workers to manage Windows users, we're rapidly expanding.
well, that's yeah. The problem is that you really can't do it any other way. Just, yeah. I don't know. Maybe the other mechanism to reduce memory retained on Linux. I know there was
You and I went back and
between
forth
me
on
and
that one a
Seth.
bunch.
Yeah, I have updated it so that it changes how the limit is set. So it's not anymore a percentage of the watchdog limit. It's actually an amount of megabytes, which though by default, if you don't change it, is a percentage of the watchdog memory limit, just to give a same default. And yeah, every time the user set it, then it uses that value.
Okay. If you want any of those in 5.4, but I can do it. Otherwise, we should just push them into 5.5.
Yeah, again.
Yeah, let's push them to 5.5.
That's fine. Yeah.
I think. Okay. That's everything I had on agenda. We said hi, Zach. I mentioned I thought I'd seen him online, but maybe not in office hours. But hi again.
Awesome. Yeah, Lucas is on the fleet team, and mostly works within the fleet code base, but also has been doing a bunch of orbit stuff. And
yes,
I
Lucas
think
submitted a PR about discovery queries.
yeah,
Is that yours, Lucas?
Yeah. So there's one PR, which is a small bug, which I mean, there's no rush to fix that. It's just a very edge case in distributed queries with discovery queries.
Yes.
And then there is another issue that needs some discussion there around like with a possible solution or workaround on some scenarios that Fleet hit with distributed queries when they are like too expensive and stuff like that. And I proposed a small diff. I added that to the issue. It's just the smallest set of changes that I could think of that would help. In this case, Fleet or any other server that talks to Osquery. I didn't want to have like a gigantic set of features to distributed queries. I know it's pretty ad hoc, but I just added a little bit of state in RocksDB to catch these expensive queries.
What is there an issue that we're talking about? You said this it's discussion. Now would be a great time to discuss it. What are we talking about?
Let me.
So the
Um,
so the context, the very short version of this is we want to add deny listing to distributed queries. Because right
Makes
now,
sense.
right now, if you send a distributed query, Osquery, the watchdog will kill the worker, but then the worker will restart, ask for distributed queries again, and potentially just get the same one and go into a crash loop.
Okay, this is issue 7658. Okay, what kind of discussion do you need?
No, I mean, mostly if it makes sense. It does solve the issue. It's just that it adds some access to RocksDB in the distributed thread. Basically, like marks a query as running, and then marks removes that entry from RocksDB. That's all it does. So I wanted to keep it that simple. It's just about like discussing if this is really a change that I believe it helps detect this kind of expensive queries and prevent those queries from crashing in a loop, as we've seen some customers see it when configuring some distributed queries that are really expensive.
I've got a couple questions. One of them, which I don't think you'll have an answer to, but Zach might have thoughts about, is Teddy used to talk about changing how the watchdog and Osquery communicated. Maybe Stefano is in on that, sort of like moving all that to, should I use a socket? None of that work got done, so like obviously we shouldn't keep waiting for it. But weird future thoughts. Maybe more tractable or actionable is one of the things that's come up is the idea of being able to query Osquery for distributed query performance history, analogous to the Osquery schedule table. I imagine to do that, we'd have to stash information in RocksDB and keep it current, which is presumably what we do for Osquery schedule. I don't know, does it make sense to try and do that in this same time, or do you think that's more split, or what do y'all think?
This is absolutely something that I want to see, and that Lucas and I have been talking about some, and I think and Lucas, please feel free to chime in here, but I think the idea is let's do the thing that has the highest impact and the lowest effort first, which is like preventing Osquery from crash looping, and then let's get into like the recording stats and understanding what's going on better.
Yeah, I agree. This is just a first step, and then we should maybe consider adding more features. Not sure if exactly like the scheduled query features, but some of them are useful, like stats and I don't know. Yeah, mostly stats.
Okay. Well, I see Stefano, and you were talking about it in this issue, so.
Yeah, my only concern was around the fact that distributed queries and scheduled queries can run concurrently, will run concurrently, so you cannot really distinguish if the effect of Osquery being killed is due to or majorly due to the scheduled query running concurrent to the distributed query or not. And I definitely agree that there's a situation where the user has very lightweight scheduled queries and distributed queries are the issue. And so this change will definitely cover that. I was just wondering from a user perspective, I'm not really concerned, I don't know, as a developer, but the risk here adding additional deny listing logic is that to the distributed queries is that distributed queries might be deny listed, but they are not the cause. Scheduled query are the cause, so you maybe end up with no distributed query run for a whole day or continuously because they are continuously deny listed for another reason.
Yeah, there's also the inverse.
At the same time, it's true that
Yeah.
this is also present in the other case. So scheduled query can be denied listed by a distributed query that runs and consumes too much, or events that are consuming too much CPU.
That is very interesting. I didn't
So-
know that those two types of queries can execute concurrently.
Yeah,
Should we add like a global query execution mutex?
which brings us to the issue where then you can delay Osquery schedules for a lot of time if you have distributed queries that run too slow. So what Lucas was suggesting was to, if we want to take care of that now or soon or whatever, but this is more complex. We would have to run the queries on a separate process, or at least distributed queries in a separate process, so that you can get the CPU only for the distributed queries, so you know when to act, and you would only kill that worker. But then you also need to have some communication between the two worker processes, because yeah, they might need to share some cache, especially now that we have that user and groups cache. So the distributed query can query the same data the other worker
There's
has
a
access
can of
to.
worms here.
Yeah, but again, I don't want to necessarily slow down. It's just I'm not sure. So maybe what I'm saying, even though it is possible, again, that distributed queries get denial listed, I don't know how often in practice it will happen. And at the same time, even if it happens, should we go and go out of our way to fix it, or at a certain point we just say, okay, the user will see that something is wrong and we'll have to troubleshoot, look closer at those queries, and just try to fix it like that, instead of having something more precise that works automatically for them. And sorry, yeah.
Yeah, the separating processes proposal was like the extreme in isolation, like we had optimal there. But yeah, it's a lot of effort, and there's I don't want to. But then there's a simpler approach of serializing queries. I think that's more manageable. It's just about discussing the prioritization, like which are like soon. So in this discussion, we can maybe open a separate issue for that. Does that make sense? That seems more feasible with the process separation one.
If you bring a process separation, I think there's another can of worms here, right? There's always this other ask about, can we actually execute queries? Can we drop permissions before we execute queries? Like, how could we even envision that? Which probably brings up questions about process separation.
Yes, we can if we would just we would do it exactly how we are doing it right now. And to be fair, it would even be probably better. I mean, in general, actually, having several processes for each permission context, let's say, would be actually better for a query, also for a security point of view. But given that our dropping of privilege is not security, yeah, it's not for security. If we are isolating specifically the distributed queries in their own process, it's even easier to just drop the whole process privileges and then get them back. Because right now we are sort of using a hack on Linux specifically to only drop the privilege of a thread, although this is violating POSIX basically. And it's not actually working. We are doing something similar on macOS, but it's not actually working, at least not for the user side. Yeah, so the UID is staying root right now. Only the groups is changing. So
I feel like I just wrote code that does that in Go, using probably the same syscalls. So kind of weird.
You mean though for a single process, for a single thread, or for the whole
for a
process?
single thread.
I see. I don't know. I mean, probably depends on the syscall. We are using that pthread set, and
Yeah, I'd have
be
to double
something
check
funny,
what I used. It's
yeah.
all very squirrely. It's all a little weird around the edges.
Yeah. But anyway, so I wouldn't say that separating into another process creates issues with permissions. So the permission issues already exist right now. So that's separate.
I think where I'm trying to go is I think we have a lot of architectural debt and things we want to do that feel related. And I don't think I would want us to pull distributed queries into their own process and come up with process IPC without thinking of the larger context of, well, how do we want to be managing processes and do we want to be splitting more of them? And I think you're probably right that maybe just doing the simple thing here is fine. How often are we actually going to see one cause the other to get deny listed as long as there's reasonable logs about it? And if it proves to happen a lot, maybe we need to revisit it. But
And my question would be to folks, what do you perceive as the bigger risk? Starving scheduled queries because we have a mutex and only one kind of query can run at the same time, or having the watchdog deny list the wrong query because of the concurrent execution?
Maybe, I mean, maybe it's more likely effectively that the issue, so that our scheduled query is being delayed if we are running distributed queries and scheduled queries serially, because in that case it's not anymore just a matter of CPU. I mean, what I mean is that you have two ways to prevent, let's say, a scheduled query to run or to send results. One way is what the watchdog kills Osquery and deny lists that query. The other way is to slow it down considerably. And so killing and deny listing the scheduled query happens only if the CPU is used a lot, not if anything is taking a lot to run. Meaning you can have, I don't know, you can have a slow disk, you can be waiting for network, and that will use basically no CPU. So that's fine.
I think there's,
but yeah,
one thing I wonder is how many times do people actually like run scheduled or distributed queries every few minutes, like continuously? The one case someone has talked to us about is the unified logging table, which they're using to pull logs from, right? So this was part of the purpose of the tracking on that last ID, was so that they could query it every 5 minutes and just sort of pull all of the recent logs every minute or every 5 minutes. I feel like most use cases are probably a little bit more temporally spread apart.
the other case would be events, though those queries cannot be deny listed. So yeah.
After all of this conversation, I just say I'm inclined to go with the simplest possible step in this direction, which I think is what Lucas proposed originally. And I think that this is a really interesting conversation. There's a lot of more that we could dig into here, and that maybe we should dig into. But I feel like the reward is greater than the risk in what Lucas proposed. And so I'm curious if other folks agree with that.
I certainly agree we should try the simple thing. I think that there's kind of this bigger question about how we manage processes and how we should think about that, and can we improve what the watchdog is tracking. And that all feels very thorny and hard to address piecemeal to me. And
Yeah.
in the absence of Teddy, I haven't seen anyone really step in and be like, I'm going to totally redo the way all of this works. Like maybe Stefano will one day. But like Teddy's the person who would have done that. Stefano might, maybe a future fleet employee will. So I feel like I'd rather do these small things that are understandable as we figure out what that core scheduler distributed process management watchdog ball of yarn looks like. I don't mean to downplay anyone's ability or contribution here. Just haven't seen anyone really come in with that.
Like depending on how big the refactor should be, like I would like to do proper sandboxing.
Yeah, that's what I would pull that into scope. Absolutely.
Yeah, which means dropping privileges the correct way. Because the thing we have right now is just workaround to prevent library code from changing system data. It is in no way helpful against an exploit.
And I'll just throw it out there that if we're talking about big refactors, I would be curious about what would it look like to rewrite Osquery core in memory safe language and then call out to the C++ Objective-C table implementations.
You were not the first person in this meeting to have floated that idea.
I'm sure I'm
I
not.
would say that the major risk would be in the table code, not in the Osquery core, really.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the exploits are going to be in the table code because that's where we process the untrusted data. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I think there's
and also the variety of contribution. I mean, the code that is contributed there varies much more than the code that is a bit more fixed and controlled. So,
Were you thinking about Go or Rust? Like, I mean, this is something interesting. I was experimenting with this using Rust.
I love Go. C Go, I'm not like a huge fan of. I have no idea what it looks like in Rust. Also, Rust looks hard, much harder than Go. So I definitely don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to hear what you think, Alessandro.
Well, I personally wanted to try out Rust, and so that is why I ended up using that. I don't think the core is gonna be. I don't think it is too much important what kind of memory safe language we use for the core. I guess I'm mostly concerned with the table code, and I did have plans for it for sandboxing. We would have to use a multi-process architecture, likely some Clang tooling to assist in sandboxing so that we can completely remove I/O access to the table code, so that you can basically virtualize the file system, which means we will have to patch things. And so that is why we are going to need some kind of LLVM pass to rewrite the source code. So yeah, there are many things we can do, but it's a big refactor. And I'm not against writing I think there's a lot of value in writing prototypes. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's something where we can iterate on or even throw it away and start again, just to like something simple with just a couple of few tables where we can implement a POC for the sandboxing, basic support for distributed. And once we find something that we like, we can, and of course, not just sandboxing, I'm also interested in adding support for better throttling. And once we virtualize the file system, we can even see how much a table is causing disk access, and we can also throttle that. There are many things we can do in there if we start writing a new prototype.
One of the things, I feel like there's a lot of potential value to be gained either in rewriting in Rust or Go, or sort of maybe even leaving in C and thinking about how to rewrite using virtualization layers. but I think a lot of those stand a very high risk of second system effects. I look at the size of the Osquery code base and I think, like, okay, I have an Osquery Go. I have a lot of tables written in Go. I kind of understand the Osquery Go SDK. I understand this wire protocol. How hard would it really be for me to basically replicate a minimum viable product in mediocre Go code? And then I look at the size of the Osquery code base and I wonder, what are all the behaviors that I am forgetting about and how many people depend on them? And sort of like what does it look like and what does that path look like? And then I put the rock back down.
It makes sense. I think that I know there are like sandboxing and things like that are hard, but the hardest part is pinning down Osquery's use case as from the different point of view of all the users. And
Sandboxing, would you do sandboxing in C++? Like, could that basically be a set of additions to the code base we have today?
so I would. One really cool thing that we have here in Osquery is that we are building things from source all the time. And so we can easily write a piece of code that takes an input, the library, and patches away all the things we don't like file system access, so that it becomes an IPC to something else that can be the Osquery IO service, for example. And then when we receive a query that uses stable code, we create a new process and basically remove any kind of access to the system. And if the library code, the table code, wants to access the disk, it has to go through our IPC that we can throttle easy, that we can configure, because maybe we want to decide that this processes table can only access all the files under proc, but nothing else. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not an hypervisor. It's what I mean with visualization is replacing the code in there in an automatic manner so that the patched code can still access things through the IPC. And without it cannot do anything.
But I mean, I'm only half joking about the idea of a hypervisor in containers, right? Is it easier to imagine a world where every table execution was effectively in a container that had very explicit mounts versus transpiling a lot of code and rewriting it on at compile time? Like,
yeah,
those both sound interesting, hard. I don't know what.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're both interesting. I also had plans for user namespaces on Linux. However, they are not available on Windows and on macOS. And so there's this secondary step that comes handy to support everything.
Yeah.
Is it possible? So, pardon me for my ignorance. There is such a thing as IPC via shared memory, right?
Yes.
Is it possible to, is it sort of works is like in a way that you allocate some memory and then you fork and then both the child process and the parent process have access to that memory? Is that vaguely how it works?
Yeah.
Is it possible for that child process? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Like, I'm not really sure on the inner working because they depend on the platform, and I'm not familiar with all the platforms. But yeah, we can share a piece of memory.
And like, let's just say on Linux, is it possible to do that and then have the child process drop privileges and still be able to access that shared memory?
Yes, permissions are only checked when opening things. And so everything that has been opened correctly will work fine.
So the IPC could happen through that memory, which would potentially resolve, like, because when I think of if you were to use thrift and you were to use Unix domain sockets like we use, we don't want any process to be able to communicate with the running as root Osquery process. But if we use something like this, we would be able to have these lower privileged processes, or a lower privileged process, continue to communicate directly with the root Osquery process.
Yeah, sure. There are many ways. We can also generate a random cookie per session that we pass to the child process that is used to authenticate when connecting back to whatever is going to be the core.
I
There are many
suspect
ways.
I suspect that if you were using Unix domain sockets, they have a very similar permissions model, but it's easier to understand how someone nosing around might throw data at a Unix domain socket. It's a lot harder to understand how to fuzz a memory segment.
Is your
Yeah, that is.
implication, Seth, that is your implication
My
that
implication is I don't think there's any additional security in one place or the other.
I see.
A suitably clever attacker should be able to, as root, should be able to attack a shared memory segment just as easily as the domain socket.
Oh yeah, if the attacker's already root, then it doesn't. In my opinion, it doesn't matter at all. It's if the attacker is an unprivileged user that I'm thinking about. You know, how do we, if we, the more we allow something running as root to communicate with things running as not root, the more likely we are to open up privilege escalation issues.
Though, as Alessandro pointed out, if you open the domain socket before dropping permissions.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but-
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, if the socket has to be public, and also, yeah, the socket used for the internal communication doesn't have to be the same use for the extensions.
Right.
And so it doesn't have to be public. We can use just, there's a really nice syscall named socket pair, I think, that will just return a pair of anonymous sockets that you can use to talk
Oh,
to
nice.
from one side to the other.
That's great.
But yeah, and now I'm going to take things a step further. Once we have this, the query entry in the schedule can also have a number of tables that you want to import. Everything else will not exist in that specific database instance. And you can more easily declare things like versioning and how this query is going to behave and things like that. And the nice thing about this is that you can have a local cache and you generate once, and that thing will stay there, and you can query, you can join as many times as you want, and we only work with the cache we pre-generated. Of course, it's not always possible because sometimes we have the constraints, but I think there are some things we can optimize there.
This all just sounds very hard.
Yeah, but that is not over. I will also I mean, SQL is really nice, but sometimes you don't need it. It would be nice to have a different interface with the same event or data source implementation that you can attach either to a SQLite implementation or something like a script or anything else, really. A good thing about
we have, like down at the API level, the tables do not present SQL.
Yeah, sure.
So depending on kind of where you're going.
Yeah, and the good thing about having a different interface there is that you can, rather than just returning everything all the time, you can decide that based on a complex set of logic to alert or not.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm
can-
saying that exists. Like the generate function in query context is kind of that.
Oh yeah, but what I meant is that it's not really easy to do if then else in SQL.
Yeah.
Right.
And-
Yeah, and to do like, all right, let me get this information about some processes that are running, and if certain conditions are met, then I want to collect up other information about maybe their parent processes and the hashes of some of them and the network connections. that they have.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I wonder if we like, just to throw out ideas here, like if we embedded like a Lua interpreter or something within Osquery, and then in your Lua script, you could run SQLite queries, but also just run like arbitrary Lua code to do whatever processing you want with that.
You're reading my mind.
Oh, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
I mean, so this goes back to my earlier comment, right? Of, well, I can imagine rewriting OS query. There's a lot. You know, what would it look like to rewrite OS query and then discover that, oh yes, there's an embedded Lua interpreter that we have to port.
In terms of rewriting OS query, the other thing I think of is like, I believe we could make an OS query 6, or maybe call it OS query 10, to follow Apple's lead. OS query X, and we could think of dropping or changing, or at least not putting in all of the effort to replicate every bit of functionality in OS query, but make sure that the core use cases, like being able to write SQL queries and getting that data, that those still work as they used to, that event-based tables still work for the most part as they used to, at least on principle. It's the same kind of thing, even if the exact semantics change to some extent. I would not be opposed to doing that kind of thing.
I would be very leery. I would love the result. Like the result is beautiful and appealing to me, but I can think of far more software projects that have completely failed at that, right? Python 3, Wix 4, Netscape being the originator of the second systems problems, Perl 6. You know, like how many ones can you think of that have succeeded in that kind of let's build a new thing in parallel and it'll be and then we'll, like, it's just it doesn't seem to work out well in practice. So I'm leery of it from that perspective.
Yeah, I would handle it as a POC, something to experiment on without, and make it really clear this is an experiment. Don't use it in production. Use Osquery, which is the main project.
I think if someone were to come in one day, and that someone might be Fleet, I don't know, and be like, I wrote a POC of what it looks like to write OS query in Rust or in Go, and here it is talking to all the same tables, and basic scheduled queries work and basic distributed queries work, but here are some rough edges. I could imagine deciding that we should just embrace that for the next version of OS query or not. But that feels like a lot of work to do speculatively.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I don't know. And there's like that other direction that we used to talk about of what would it be like to pare down OS query so that everything looked like an extension. You know, instead
Yeah, I think that is the biggest question that we need to answer first. We can come up with the biggest, most wonderful architecture, but I think the biggest issue we have right now is that the core is too big and everyone wants to merge things inside, because using extensions, at least in C++, is very cumbersome.
But just to clarify, you mean core as in the core code that makes everything work plus tables? Because
yeah,
what I would yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, but because I was gonna say, I think that while Osquery code still Osquery core code still has a lot to be replicated if you want to do a new core, but the majority of the code is in the table. So the question is, when you're going to that other code or Rust or implementation, are we reusing the table code, or do we have to rewrite those 200 tables for all platforms from scratch? So
I
that
wouldn't.
is a huge work too.
Yeah, I would start with important ones like processes and users. And like, I don't think that. I mean, once we have, and I think this is mandatory, once we have the extension mechanism in place that has to be similar or most likely the same as what we have right now, so that people can use their extensions, I don't think it makes sense to implement too many core tables in this kind of experiment that we would build. We would have to be really, really sure that this design is worth committing to before we port things over.
I mean,
I don't know how it would work with sandboxing if we end up implementing that, if you can just copy things over.
that sort of points to an interesting path where you could imagine, core, the Osquery core itself is like 5 tables, right? Because the watchdog needs a couple of tables and things like that. And then everything else is an extension. So the Osquery distribution becomes core and tables.ext or something. And then you could imagine POCs to replace core.
I think my concern is when we say extension, at least as of today, when we say extension, we mean a separate process running as, running and talking over Thrift, which has caused all manner of problems and has issues, we think, in terms of like doing event-based tables and the amount of throughput over the IPC and that kind of thing. And it makes me think that maybe it could be more of like a dynamically linked library kind of model where you can link in all of those tables, but they actually run in that same process. Or maybe they run in one other process that has actually shared memory with Osquery core or something. But I don't know.
I don't know. I think that would be I think experimenting around what core and extension interfaces look like would also be interesting. Like, is there something better than Thrift? I don't know.
I think it is good to have different processes for when it comes to integrity. I know I know it is heavier than just loading a library, but I think there's some value in it.
I feel like it's at least more easily understood. Debugging loading is a lot easier this way than when everything is like a shared library.
You mean debugging?
Library load issues, version skew across builds.
Oh yeah.
I don't even know what happens if extensions depend on different versions of a third library.
Well, likely we won't have this problem again. I mean, you have written the Go SDK with your coworkers, and they don't share the pitfalls that we have with C++. Like there is some, like our C++ SDK sucks because we have to compile the whole Osquery source
Well,
but
we could stop. Like, we could absolutely release just the Thrift-based Osquery SDK and be done with it. And just no one's wanted to do that. And originally, I think no one did, with the idea that people who are writing C++ extensions might want to leverage some of the existing Osquery utilities or utility functions. I think that assumption was false.
That is true, but it's only one side of the SDK. The other side is that if you build with our source tree, you will also inherit the fact that you're basically cross-compiling against well-known CentOS 6 version.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you build under our source tree with our toolchain, you can reuse our libraries and you will automatically get something that can be deployed on anything that Osquery supports. If we were to release the SDK only, they would not be able to do that, and they would have to handle redistribution from scratch. So either going down the same route with it, with third-party libraries like Boost, or accept the fact that they will have to build the extension on every possible system they want to deploy to, including glibc.
I'm not sure that's wrong, and like that just feels like C is hard to work in, right? Go makes that pretty easy because Go is a pretty easy cross-platform library. So,
Kind of. It depends on whether you are using Sigo or not. As long as you stay away from Sigo, yeah.
no,
But
Launcher uses Sigo pretty extensively. It's not that hard.
Yeah, but without any kind of toolchain on top of it, it is like compiling C directly, and so it will depend on like the glibc version on the system, and it won't run on another version if the symbols are there. It was a way to make it simpler to use the C++ extension SDK.
Yeah, I agree that you're sort of highlighting the trade-off, but I think that going down the path that we went down makes it very hard for people to write C++ extensions because they effectively have to understand the Osquery world much better than if it was a standalone SDK. I don't write C++ extensions, so I don't really have super strong opinions.
Yeah. In our experience is we saw this redistribution problem either badly addressed or not addressed at all. And I think it is a huge burden when people want to deploy C++ code. I'm not against making a smaller, better SDK that doesn't depend on Osquery. I would very, very much like it, as we at TradeOffsBits, we internally always deal with redistribution problems. We know how to handle them, and having a smaller SDK would be really helpful for us.
You have the thrift file. There is no smaller SDK.
Yeah.
Yeah, I basically could just copy what we've done with Osquery Python and Osquery Go in C++.
I made myself a Ruby SDK a while ago.
Oh, cool.
It's not shipping anywhere, but like, what is it other than 10 lines of code on the thrift bindings? So stuff like that.
How about the Bash? I saw the PowerShell bindings. I don't remember who made them.
I saw those. Make shellcode bindings and we ship it with with rootkits.
Or a Tickle one, or a Perl one. Also, is Perl memory safe? Can we use it for the new Osquery core?
Perl, yeah, it should be memory safe. They've got an interpreter. Aren't pretty much all interpreted languages memory safe?
I don't have the camera on. I'm joking.
Depends on the interpreter itself.
Yeah, right. Good point, Stefano. Folks, I have to go, but this has been a very interesting discussion. Thank you all. And you can find me on chat if you need me.
It is now 2. And while this has been a very fun discussion, I might declare office hours over if people don't have other pertinent information, things to bring up. Joe, do you have any PRs you want to make sure you bring to our attention?
You reviewed the 2 I have open. I have another one in the pipeline, but it's not out yet. The 2 you reviewed, though, I addressed the comments. So if you take another look at them, that would be great.
Mike, is that the OpenSSL security announcement that is pending?
Yeah, it says a new release will be available today.
It's I saw some commentary on it. Isn't it for like some? Oh God.
It's a CVE that they said is moderate in the 1.1 branch. Are we using a 2 branch and so we're not impacted?
Okay, this is the last thing I saw is it was only on the version 3 branch. I thought we were still on 1, but
It's a high severity in that branch, but then there's a moderate severity in 1.1.x Q, whatever it is.
Q. There's okay. Do we even have information on the 1.1 Q1? I feel like I skimmed the 3 one, and okay. The 3.0 introduced a bug in the RSI implementations for CPUs that support some instructions. It makes stuff with a 2048-bit private key incorrect, and memory corruption will happen, blah, 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 TLS servers. I suspect Osquery is not vulnerable because, broadly speaking, we are not a TLS server. So this is probably the kind of thing that we will get reports on from Black Duck and similar.
Yeah.
But
it would be a
probably
shame to release 5.4 in 2 days, and this the first day that someone gets the release, hey, it's vulnerable.
Would you like to hold 5.4 until Osquery releases enough?
Well, if we updated OpenSSL most recently, like 21 days ago, I assume that the process is quick to
Yeah, it
update
is.
again.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, we'll make a PR really soon.
Okay. All right. And I'll reference it in the ongoing update libraries issue, which I've bumped to the next milestone because it'll be happening again.
So currently we said we should re-review the Windows Update History PR and then cut 5.4.
Yeah.
I leave it to you, Stefano and Mike, about whether you want to squeak in an Osquery release, an OpenSSL release, or not. I'm kind of good either way. I don't want to wait too long.
If it's quick, I'd like to
No,
do it
it's
just because we're going to get asked like immediately.
Yes.
No, it's just a matter of downloading the version, getting the SHA, updating the SHA, doing the build, so 10 minutes, and then maybe around an hour for the CI to build the PR.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Okay. Appreciate it. I got the milestone down to a few things. I'll discuss offline so we don't continue the office hours.
On that note, yay, OpenSSL. Happy summer, everyone. Thank you for your time and your efforts, and I will talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.